Revolution Radio proudly presents live from Phoenix, Arizona, the Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here for topics you won't hear about on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, nutrition, and conspiracy facts regarding your personal sovereignty. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
And a very good evening to everybody. This is our first debut for Friday nights. We've added Friday nights to the list of shows that we do. So thanks for joining us here. And I have a very interesting guest on this evening from Australia, and I'm going to bring him on shortly. Of course, many of you know from the event pages on Facebook that we now do for the shows who our guest is, and what the topic is, of course, is chemtrails and chemtrail activism. I'm looking at an article that's really disturbing to me right now. It's called Get Used to Record-Breaking Heat Bureau. It is come out of the Age of Environment tabloid. That's where the story hailed from in January, I believe. And we're going to have a few articles this weekend that are going to be coming up on the Truth Denied website as well. Just go to the breaking news pages. And of course, we'll be interlinked with Paul Mack, who is my guest this evening. And if anyone wants to take a look at any of his website and his work, it's all linked on the truthdenied.com. And of course, it'll be in the chat room. I want to thank a Mad Painter for producing my shows on Fridays now. I appreciate it. And of course, if you want to listen to a Mad Painter's shows, it's called Open Canvas, and they're on Monday nights here on Revolution Radio at 10 p.m. Eastern. Again, that's Open Canvas, Mondays at 10 p.m. And he's got some extraordinary controversial shows as well. So you might want to take a listen to him as well. The article that I'm looking at that I find disturbing, let me read a few of the highlights of it for you all. There's a photo of a beach in Australia with a lot of people on the beach, and it says, "Life's a beach. As the warming trend increases over coming years, record-breaking heat will become more and more common, scientists say. Temperatures off the charts as Australia turns deep purple, and U.S. posts year of record high temperatures as well. The heat wave that has scorched the nation since Christmas is a taste of things to come, with this week's records set to tumble again and again in the coming years, climate scientists are saying. Quote, "Those of us who spend our days trawling and contributing to the scientific literature on climate change are becoming increasingly gloomy about the future of human civilization." That's a strong statement. The hottest average maximum temperature ever recorded across Australia, 40.33 degrees, that's not Fahrenheit, I believe, set on Monday, again this was written in January of 2013, may only stand for 24 hours and be eclipsed when all of Tuesday's readings come in. Previously, that record had stood since December 21st of 1972. The current heat wave, in terms of its durations, its intensity, and its extent, is now unprecedented in records, said the Bureau of Meteorology's manager of climate monitoring and prediction, David Jones. He said clearly the climate system is responding to the background warming trend. Everything that happens in the climate system now is taking place on a planet which is a degree hotter than it used to be. Now, a degree may not sound like a lot to all of you, but it is. As the warming trend increases over coming years, record-breaking heat will become more and more common, Dr. Jones said. We know that global climate doesn't respond monotonically. It does go up and down with natural variation. That's why some years are hotter than others, because of a range of factors. But we're getting many more hot records than we're getting cold records. That's not an issue that is explained away by natural variation. Australia's climate is based on an interplay of many factors, including regional and local weather patterns. patterns, El Nino and La Nina climate cycles, and the Indian Ocean dip hole, all superimposed on the greenhouse gas-driven warming trend. While temperatures vary on a local and regional scale, globally it has now been 27 years since the world experienced a month that was colder than average. The impacts of the rising heat on farming, food, water, and human health have been studied closely for years, and the trends being played out now mirror those laid out years ago in projections by the Bureau of Meteorology, the CISRO, and the Garnet Climate Change Review. Now, if there is one thing that I will interject here, we are seeing a lot of controversy when it comes to the weather, extreme weather, temperatures that are too low, temperatures that are too high, mostly temperatures that are going up and down sporadically, which I term is as unstable weather. The global climate is unstable. And what does that mean to all of us humans or anybody that's living on the planet? Instability has to be pointing at something. Now, I don't follow the global warming hoax that is linked to cap and trade and all the rest of it, and quite a few of the laws that have aggravated me in regards to climate change. By the way, climate change is now the new terminology for global warming. This is a major concern. And then you enter into this field, radiation management, let's say, or all the geoengineering. And of course, those grids in the sky that we refer to so fondly of as chemtrails. What are chemtrails? Has anybody tested chemtrails? What are the effects of chemtrails? What are the effects of geoengineering on the planet? And who gave them permission? That's what I want to know. I'm sure that's what people like my guest, who will be coming on the show shortly, wants to know. I want to know who is in charge and who gave them permission, because we, the people of all of these countries, all the countries of the world, we are supposed to be in charge. We are the governing agents of our countries. We weren't given the memo. This is an extraordinary subject, one that I've been investigating for nearly 4 years, and the rabbit hole is deep. That's all I can say. The rabbit hole is absolutely astounding. And those who've been hired as disinformationists and so forth by the governments of the world to be in the center of activism groups and cause disharmony and slow down momentum with infighting, etc., it's such a huge topic. Tonight's topic is chemtrail activism growing, the protest movements, networking internationally, and of course, the April 20th protest. A 46-year-old New Zealander living in Melbourne, Australia. My guest, Mr. Paul Mack, has a background in construction and currently works as a project manager for a large construction company. He says he was awakened in 2001 to the global situation regarding Agenda 21 and the New World Order. And he's spent the last few years seeing just how deep the rabbit hole goes. 12 months ago, he became increasingly concerned about growing geoengineering trends and the lack of activism taking place to bring accountability to the situation. He strongly believes that unless action is taken now to bring a ban, moratorium into place to halt geoengineering and stratospheric aerosol spraying, aka chemtrails, that the planet and life as we know it is in great danger from an extinction-level event. The madness of a handful of evil men and women must be stopped. And it is up to you and I to call these people to account. In partnership with some fellow Australians and New Zealanders, they have worked hard over the last 12 months to bring together a national, international network of like-minded people who are documenting and collating the growing body of evidence in regards to chemtrails, as well as forming a growing international protest movement to bring awareness to the public arena. The Australian and New Zealand geoengineering protests had their first mass rally in January 2013, where over 180 people from 4 nations took to the streets to protest geoengineering and demand government disclosure. He now runs a quarterly protest, the next dates being April 20th and July 20th, which we will get into tonight. We have the links for the Facebook page and the email available for you all on thetruthDenied.com. It's all linked up right there on the front page. We want you to link up, like their pages, join them in this movement. I know it's hard to believe that the majority of humans do not even know, or not even aware of geoengineering programs, this thing we call climate change, the money behind it, the billionaires that are funding it, completely unaware. So I'd like to welcome my guest, Mr. Paul Mack. And I thank you, Paul, for the work that you're doing to bring awareness to the world. Welcome to the show, and how are you doing?
Hey, Roxy. Thank you for having me on the show. It's good to be here and doing well this morning, a little after 10 o'clock in the morning down in Melbourne, Australia.
Awesome.
So, really good to be here. And, just listening to your preamble, and I've gone to that article that you were reading from in our local newspaper down here, The Age, and that beach that's at the top of that article is like a 30-minute drive from where I am. And the article itself is pretty much clearly a propaganda piece on climate change and what's going on. Those record-breaking temperatures that you were talking about, I can verify, having just lived through them, that a lot of those days we had very clearly geoengineered skies and massive HARP activity happening to drive that temperature up. In fact, the day they broke the record, the very next day, the temperature dropped down some, 15, 20 degrees literally, and it rained. It was almost like they turned the HARP off and just let it sort of reset itself. So they pushed that boundary deliberately to break that record and used it as a tool to say, see, look, climate change is real. Australia's suffering big bushfires and high temperatures, and they're record breaking. That was a very, very deliberate thing that they did, and it was not pleasant to live through temperature-wise. I can tell you, just did a quick Celsius to Fahrenheit conversion. The average temperature during that period, 40.33 Celsius, is 104.59 Fahrenheit, and we typically had days that were, in the 42, 43 bracket, which is 109 for you guys. So very, very hot temperatures, very, very difficult to live in those sorts of temperatures for prolonged basis. Not our normal cycle. We'd normally have 3 or 4 really hot days, and then we'll go through a very humid period with massive thunderstorms and a few days of cool down, and then repeat that. That's typical for Australian weather, not 9, 10, 11, 12 days straight of high 30 into 40 degree temps. So it was interesting to hear you talk about that, because it's clearly an engineered piece to just promote the furthering climate change agenda. And climate change is real, but it's man-made in as much as we're causing it by geoengineering, not anything that the planet's doing to itself. That's for sure.
Agreed. And thank you for interjecting to that piece, because it's the propaganda is on. And, it's quite interesting because just to mention briefly, here in the States, there was a Clean Energy Standard Act of 2012 that was initiated in March of 2012. And, of course, one of the groups that was backing that legislation was Al Gore. And his organization. And it never made it through, which I think my point is, it is interesting that even the governments, I think, have massive confusion around what they're even supposed to be doing. As far as I think the left hand's not speaking to the right. And I did look at a bill that actually was passed in Australia. And I read through some of it. And these bills are absolutely convoluted, and I don't think that they're being put together for the sake of clean energy, free energy, as they are summarizing. I think it has a lot more to do with cap and trade and money and more money. It appears that they want to reduce, greenhouse emissions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and even the use of oil. But it seems that that's never going to happen. And in our country, this Clean Energy Standard Act of 2012 never even passed. I mean, they can't even get it off the floor. So, you know what I mean? It's like it's coming down. It's coming down. And again, the left hand not speaking to the right. So you probably have a lot of people who are in government who don't even know what the heck is going on. And that's proof. I mean, for sure, these bills are 2,000 and 3,000 pages long, and nobody reads them, and nobody signs them, or nobody wants to sign off on them because they don't understand them. Regardless, how do you feel about the bill that was the law, I should say, that was passed in Australia, or are you aware of it?
Yeah, a little bit. Look, I mean, a lot of those things, Roxy. I mean, these scientists. Far from being, the independent, authoritative body that they possibly could and should be, they're beholden to the government for their grant money to do their research, and of course the government can talk to them about their research and say, we just want you to tweak that a little bit to suit our ends, and we'll give you some more grant money to that. So basically, a lot of these guys, they've got all the huff and puff and bluster, and you should listen to us, and we're the kings of the information. But essentially, they're just media and propaganda whores, and they sell themselves for a high price. And then Tim Flannery is one of our guys down here. I mean, a few years ago, he received the Order of Australia for his work in climate science and predicting that our dams would be empty and houses would be flooding with ocean water by 2012, which might add was last year. And then currently, buys a beachside property in Sydney and New South Wales and enjoys government largesse at the moment. None of his predictions have come true, through. So pretty much a big feeling in our country that he should be stripped of his Order of Australia and made to apologise to us all for being a climate alarmist, So we've got a lot of that down here. They periodically pass very things like permanent cloud seeding has now been authorised for the snowy mountains for the snowmaking fields, but all of that, of course, runs off into our rivers and things like that. So they periodically pass these things, and it's more just to look like they're doing something, rather than actually doing something. Yeah.
Right. And I agree with that as well. And I think, that whole global warming that, Al Gore had done in the beginning, I think people bought it for a little bit, and then and then people aren't buying it. And it doesn't mean that citizens of the world know what's going on necessarily, but they're at least not taking the bait. And that's something that I think is an in for you and I as activists. When you, let's say, begin a conversation with somebody, you're trying to educate somebody, Paul, on what is happening with climate change or geoengineering or the purposeful changing of the climate, where do you begin? And what is your most successful way of approaching somebody so that they don't think you're crazy and are more accepting of what you have to show them?
That's a good question, because you do get that tilt of the head, like you're on the same planet as I'm on sort of look occasionally. Look, Roxy, I mean you tailor that to whomever you're talking to. Basically, I'm always looking for the conversation. I look for people who are looking up with their heads tilted already and wondering, and it's easy to engage people on that level. If there's an opportunity. A news article that pops up or something's of interest is generated in a conversation, I might pounce on that and just throw out a feeler and see where that person's sitting in terms of what they think of, climate change is a very easy place to start. I mean, that can be a very sort of black and white conversation. There's people that are adamant that man-made fossil fuel burning is causing this problem. But I think most people are open to that as a conversation. It's a good lead-in. Geoengineering as a term and terminology is something that we really probably should be using, because it's what the scientific community is now using and espousing and pushing forward. And there's a mountain of material, weight of evidence of these programs that's out there in the marketplace. I mean, I don't know how anyone can deny it. Their own people, their own scientists are writing that, that they're saying either A, they are going to do it, or B, they are doing it, or C, hey, is it a good idea to do it because, we might stuff the planet up more. So people are already talking about that. I think if you can get onto geoengineering as a topic, then you can go down, a myriad of different roads with that. The word chemtrail is, it's got some really good connotations. It's got some really negative ones as it's been utilised and generated throughout, the last sort of 5 or 6 years, let's say. But it's a legitimate word, and not everyone's aware of it yet. But as more and more people become aware of it, they are linking it to that conspiracy side of things. So I like to tie that straight back to a geoengineering perspective, and say, look, the stratospheric aerosol injection. You want to see a government document? Here it is. It's here in black and white. The government's writing about the fact that they're doing this or planning on doing this. Where of course they're doing it covertly mostly right now. But if you can use that terminology to your effect, then it ties in with the whole thing. So it's a difficult conversation to have with some people. 10% of the people are just going to deny what you're saying no matter what. 10% of the people are going to believe what you're saying no matter what. It's the other 80% that's up to you and the conversation that you have. You don't want to sort of go at it hammer and tongs all the time. There's room for sitting back and just planting a few seeds and letting people look up themselves and notice. I think when people look up for the first time, they see their very first chemtrail and they recognise it for what it is. That penny drops, and conversations that you might have planted seeds in earlier will come back and bear fruit at that time. I have a lot of people come back to me and say, you know what, I listened to what you said the other day, and I looked into it, and then I saw this plane go over, and I couldn't believe it. You're right. It's not a contrail; it's a chemtrail. What do I need to do now? How can I get more information? I'm really freaked out about this. Because that first thought of your government actually poisoning you from the air is a terrifying thought. So, you generate the back sort of conversation through planting the seed up front, really.
Oh, wow. And that sounds reasonable, actually. And then, like you said, point out some of the facts of what the government is talking about or what science is talking about. There are a couple of arguments, and one of them is, a lot of these scientific white papers are talking about the idea of possibly Trump. And if you're just joining us, we are speaking with Paul Mack from Australia, and the subject is chemtrails. And before we left for the break, Paul, I get a lot of questions myself, such as, for instance, David Keith seems to be the spokesperson for all geoengineering science, and Keith Caldera and a few others, but David Keith, it seems to be the mainstream for geoengineering. And when he talks about it in interviews, ABC did a fabulous interview with him. He really exposed the mission. I mean, he was talking about it in a past tense. And generally, they talk about it as though they're looking at, computer models before they dare go out and experiment because of the effects that it can possibly have. What geoengineering technologies can, maybe screw it up or something, and can they effectively cool the planet, and what would the costs be? When really they're already doing it. They've already implemented it. And of course, the other question that we get all the time is, have you tested a contrail? So these are the most common of the questions, which which I think are ridiculous because both are happening and both have been tested. But can you talk about that for a little bit? And why does weather modification exist anyway? That would be another good one.
Why? Because they can. Man is he's not the sharpest of beasts some days, and just because you can do something doesn't mean you probably should do it. The terminology around geoengineering is quite interesting, because to anyone who's researched it for any length of time, so just 6 months even, it's patently obvious that it's happening, and it's happening on a global scale. So on the one hand, there's good anecdotal evidence and physical empirical evidence in terms of, people have been doing soil and water tests and hair and blood analysis, that sort of thing, and they're finding exactly what we'd expect to find from the supposition that we're being sprayed is high levels of the chemicals, aluminium, barium, strontium, sulfur dioxides, even uranium in some cases. So to say that it's in a planning stage and it's in a stage where this is something that's mooted to be coming as a way to save the planet from the evils of climate change, is it's an out and out lie, basically. What they're doing with that, I believe, is just pre-positioning themselves for a greater release of information at some point. I think the cat's sort of right on the edge of just tipping out of the bag with what's going on with geoengineering. And the whole chemtrail phenomenon. So there'll be an event that is a tipping point. I'm not sure what that will be. It will be quite a significant thing. And then they'll confess. They'll say, you know what, we've been doing this for a little while now. We didn't really want to tell you because we didn't want to panic you about this situation. But it's okay. We've got it in hand, and we're the masters of it because we've been doing it for a while. So I think that's what will happen in the future for the subject matter, the content to come forward and be further legitimised by the guys who are perpetrating it. At the same time, for these shills to sit out there and say chemtrails aren't real and keep banging on chemtrail, contrail science, they're just, the horse is bolted. You're shutting the door behind the fact. We're all aware that you're there in a prepaid position to put disinformation out there. But hey, why don't you bring your topic and your conversation over to where the real people are playing, which is geoengineering and the weight of evidence that's it sits there. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of documents that have been produced by the scientific community and publications, and you can go to many of them and just look at the content and the weight of topic that goes through that on the whole thing. So, I don't understand why they're continuing to try and hide something that's clearly obvious to anyone who cares to look at it. Apart from the fact that like you said before, Roxy, most people aren't clearly awake to what's going on. They're more interested in looking at their iPhones as they walk along, or watching X Factor or some TV show, or stuck in the daily grind without sort of realising. And that's where I looked around a little while back and thought, people aren't awake and we need to wake them up. So we began the process of doing that through peaceful, active protesting. And that then sort of paints a bit of a target on you at the same time, in terms of those who are out there trying to hide this and legitimise it before it falls over and hits them in the face, which it quite clearly could do, because, I mean, obviously there's massive corporations as well as government that are complicit in this, and some of those will take a very, very hard fall once the people wake up and realise that they've been complicit in spraying us with highly toxic chemicals, like you say, without our permission.
Correct. Now, has anybody even remotely come close to getting, for instance, in Australia, anyone to even listen to the idea of a moratorium just an idea of at least having a moratorium until things are sorted out?
No, our government is clearly still in the first phases of that denial. Our members throughout the nation have written hundreds, if not thousands, of letters and emails to their elected representatives and our federal government and transport ministers and the Environmental Protection Agency, and we're met just with a scoff of derision and flat denial, basically, that no, it's just normal. You're just saying contrails. It's just jet gases and water vapor cooling into crystalline matter in the air. Nothing to be worried about. So, no, definitely not. The government is still in very much a flat denial of the situation, and whether that's because a lot of people are actually still asleep in the government, or whether there's obviously an out and out agenda of denial. But we haven't made that as an inroad. We continue to send those emails and those letters, and we're sending them out to not just the government now, but to other organisations that may be wondering what's going on. Things like the Beekeepers Association, beekeepers in Australia now wondering why their bees are dying. So it's good to have a little chat to them and say, hey, look, this is what we believe is happening and why your bees are dying. How about you guys write a letter to the government as well? That sort of thing. Just trying to get more and more people to
participate.
Shoot the flaming arrows and try and start a fire somewhere,
Great idea. Absolutely great idea. And I think that I love your attitude because what you're saying is, hey, even though we have written, hundreds, thousands of letters and not really, we have done the same, and my organization has done the same, not to receive one letter back. And this is repeat letters going to the same governors, the same senators, the same Congress, even the same lawyers over repeatedly, not even getting none of us getting one letter back, not even acknowledging they were in receipt of our letter. Mm-hmm. And so, one would think, oh gosh, maybe we should just give up on that part then and move to something else because that doesn't seem to be working. But I think I like your attitude, because what you're saying is we're not going to stop. You're just going to continue to generate those letters and send them, and then invite other suffering organizations, others who have noticed, like the bee keepers, get them involved as well, and farmers and whoever else you can for that matter, and get them. Now, what would you say to the argument, though, because I've definitely had these thoughts myself, that if the government is the absolute culprit, then why are we going to the culprit asking for change? Because,
it was once said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And that's kind of what we're doing in a sense, but we have to do that because at the base level, the government is the one that's going to have to acknowledge this. And, like I said, that the scientific community is producing masses of information on geoengineering, solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection. These guys are being paid by the government, and they're producing this information. So we've got this ridiculous situation where, on the one hand, the government's denying that this is happening. We do get letters back of denial. I'm surprised you guys don't even get that. And on the other hand, they've got their own bodies producing this evidence saying, yes, we are doing it. So if we stop the one side, we're not going to be able to call the other side into an open air discussion and get some clarity on the situation. So we're asking we're telling the government point blank, number one, we know you're lying and denying this. And number two, we want disclosure. We're ordinary citizens. We're not, some fringe Fruit Loop group. We're just ordinary people that woke up one day, looked up, realised something is going on, has done some research. We've got soil, water, aluminium tests. We've got, good anecdotal evidence. We've got empirical evidence. and we want to present it to you, and we want disclosure, and we're going to keep doing that until keep saying those things until you guys come clean about it. And they've got to come clean about it. They have to. They know they've painted themselves into a corner, and we're not going to take the pressure off. And that's why we keep going on sending these. And some of our guys send quite a few hundred of these, like you say, repeat things again every week. And I'm sure our elected officials are sitting there squirming about this whole situation and wondering how they're going to get out of it without looking like virtually the criminals that they are. So while the wall of silence continues to be put up, there's cracks in it, and it's only by persistence that we will open one of those cracks and kick a hole through and get this thing going.
Correct. And being that it is a global action, it has to be a global activism as well, because the more countries that band together, then it is pressure on the government, I do think that you're correct. I think that there are a lot of people in government that actually probably don't answer our letters because they don't want to know. See, what they don't know, they don't have to look at, and then they can just stay in denial and let somebody else handle it. They don't want to get their shoes dirty, so to speak. So they'd rather just never reply at all to say that they won't deny, they won't confirm. They just stay completely out of it.
And that's typical, not just for government members, but members of the public.
Sure.
There's some very, very bright people out there who do not want to know about this, because they know if they acknowledge this or they look into it, something inside of them is telling them, that's the edge of the rabbit hole. They're going to fall in, and they're going to have to address it. Their conscience is going to say to them, you turn your head on this one and deny it and pretend that nothing's going on. And you're gonna have a very, very seared conscience, So they know if they don't address it up front, then they can just pretend it's not happening, and they don't have to deal with it. I know a lot of people like that, and in their heart of hearts, they know that they're gonna have to do something about it at the end of the day, and that's that's where I worked out that if we're out in public waving banners around, if we're doing this in a peaceful manner and just presenting ourselves as normal people, that we're going to create a tipping point or use that as a tool to create a tipping point quicker than writing a letter. If we get some mainstream media coverage on this, albeit positive and or negative, people are going to have that tipping point thrust upon them in their thinking. It's like, well, who are these guys and what are they doing and why are they doing this? Why? And that's where we want to get people to, Roxy, is at that point where they ask that question, why, and from there on in, it's all beer and Skittles, as we say down here.
Right, correct. Well, and environmentalists have always had problems and been painted as crazies throughout decades. We all know this, and even the famous Erin Brockovich. I'm sure you've heard the name.
Sure.
Look at what she went through. The movie was just on the other night, and I took a look at a little bit of it. But I've seen the movie quite a few times, and look at what the woman went through to get justice. For so many people. And it's a perfect example of if you do not stop. I mean, her whole life was seemingly ruined at one point.
Yeah.
We've written Erin quite a few times in regards.
Have we?
Right? And I don't know what you're getting back, but we get a form letter that basically says, thanks for contacting us, and we're not able to proceed with this. So it's unfortunate but she does still handle major cases. What would you say the reason why she's rejecting this? Because I would think by now that thousands of letters have come her way regarding chemtrails.
Definitely. I'm talking with people all over the world, and a handful of us that I know of have all sent letters off to Erin and got that pat reply back from her associate. There's something in the background that she's removed some of her association with what she set up there in terms of foundation. She's still a spokesperson, but I think someone in her team is sort of more handling that in the background. I'm not sure if we've even connected directly with Erin on this issue or whether it's sort of been stopped from being given to her. But I was really a little bit disappointed because I thought, if anyone would understand what it is that we're going through, it would be Erin herself. I watched that movie a few years back, and she fought a long and protracted battle, a good fight, and ultimately, a winning action in the end. I don't know the reasons why her lack of response. It would be great if we could have her on side or someone like her on side, and I would certainly encourage anyone who might be listening from her organisation to to get in touch with us so that we can show you the evidence that we've got. I mean, they say there's no evidence, but there is evidence of what's going on, and it's pretty plain. It's only you only got to put your A, B, C together, your 1s, 2, 3s, and you've got something that you can present. So I'm not sure why Erin's not on board with us, but hopefully we can shake that tree and keep shaking it and get something to drop out of it.
I think that one of the reasons could be because this is global, and it's there are so many scientists and so many institutions for science that are involved in this, and so many. It is so big that it's very possible that what you would be taking on would be all governments of the world.
We're taking on the New World Order at the end of the day.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
It's a big bite of the cherry to take for anyone.
This is an international horrendous scam at the very least. And I think that it's so what's the word? It's so contrived and it's so convoluted, and it's so many boxes, there's just so many different arenas of this. The spider web goes way out there. And I think that it spiders off, I should say, into so many segments that I think it's even hard to follow.
It's insidious, definitely. And that's a scary thought at the same time, but you know what? They're spraying us, they're poisoning us, they're trying to kill us. Ultimately, they do have an agenda of global depopulation. If you go down the New World Order Illuminati rabbit hole, that's pretty clear. I mean, even Vice President Biden, I heard, came out the other day and about phase 5 of bringing the New World Order out. I mean, it's plain speak. So if you are awake to that at the same time and you realise that is an agenda, global depopulation is an agenda, and you put those 2 and 2 together with what's happening with chemtrails and geoengineering, you quickly arrive at a point like I did, I guess, and I say, look, if I sit here and do nothing, I'm just going to get sprayed and die anyway, so why not stand up and do something about it? Either die trying or you die not trying, one of the two. My conscience won't permit me to not take these guys on, and I don't know what that's going to cost me at the end of the day. It may cost me a lot, but I'm not going to sit down and take this. I'm not going to stand by and watch my children be sprayed to death by a handful of megalomaniacs who think they have a good idea. This is our planet. We're citizens, global citizens of this planet, and we have rights, and they know that we are the majority. And that, if we were to actually all just wake up at the same time and go, no, that they would be in a very, very weak position, even with all their, multi-billions of aeroplanes and tanks and guns and bombs and bullets. The global uprising of the populace, not going to be easy to put down, unless you go to an open warfare state.
What I'd like to know is how this thing got to be such a large scale operation. Seriously, how did it get to be such a large scale operation? I mean, because you describe a very similar thing that happened with me. One day looked up and noticed these grids. And started asking, what the heck is that? It starts off like that, but years ago, you know what I mean? And like yourself. And it's like, I don't know when the transition was made. In other words, I don't know when they started spraying these. To my knowledge is what I'm saying, not what we know today that it was in the 90s. I'm saying I just don't remember, 1 year it was there all of a sudden. It was just there. And I don't recall seeing it in prior years anywhere that I lived or growing up. So what I'm saying is, didn't they think we'd notice? And if we do notice, I mean, it's the easiest thing to point out, but yet isn't it the toughest thing to convince people of?
It is. And somebody actually pointed this out to me the other day, and it was a little bit of a light going off. They said, that the global agenda here for chemtrails and geoengineering is going to be a longer term program rather than a shorter term program by the way they are conditioning our children. And if you look in kids' cartoons these days, movies, you're going to see a massive amount of chemtrails in the background of those things. NASA's rewritten all of the cloud charts, and kids in geography at school are now brainwashed with all of these wonderful looking geoengineered clouds with new names, and being taught that they're normal. There's a normalization process that's going on. So that's how we know it's going to be a longer term program and agenda that they're rolling out rather than a shorter term thing. So they are trying to brainwash us into accepting. And I was surprised, like yourself. It was really only 2 years ago that I sort of started looking into chemtrails, geoengineering. 2 years ago that I woke up to the fact and had that revelation. And we have something inside, it's called a reticular activating system. It's like you're going to go buy a new car and you look around and there's a car in your mind you've got, and then suddenly you see that car everywhere, or you buy it and you see it everywhere. It's the same principle. It's as soon as that thing is awoken to you and you have the revelation about chemtrails, geoengineering, then suddenly it becomes prolific and you're going, how did I miss this? How could I have not seen this? And that's what they're relying on, is that we stay under that sort of level and we don't look up. I mean, it's patently obvious going back through the information that mid-90s, this is when it really kicked off, but it can be traced back to World War II as a start, when they were experimenting with smoke screens on the battlefield and how to make those things. So that's been progressively developed through the 60s and 70s. The Vietnam War is a real proving ground for spray technology, and the whole Monsanto evil kicking off there as well. And then working out that you can modify the weather and you can use these chemicals and tools to do that. Through the 80s and 90s, developing that into a weather warfare platform, through the early 2000s to what we see today, where we've got, mobile HARP stations that they just now ship and tow to different countries and set them up offshore so they can fire directed energy weapons at people and not have a smoking gun. It's all a matter, and this is what we referenced back to before. People don't want to know, because they know if they look into it, then they're going to have to take personal responsibility. They're going to have to be accountable for their thought process and their actions from there. It means that they're probably going to have to do something to stop that. And a lot of people are scared about getting out in public.
And thanks. If you're just joining us, we're at the top of the second hour now, and we've been speaking with the lovely Paul Mack from Australia, who is a chemtrails activist. He's got a lot more to fill us in on. And if you want to call the show this evening, we are happy to take your calls at any given time in this next hour. So the number is 347-688-2902. And again, that's 347-688-2902. And if you forget that number and you're listening to the show on freedomslips.com, the number is right there in front of your face. So you won't have a problem finding the number. But again, 347-688-2902. Give us a call. We're glad to take your calls if you have some questions for Paul. I did get a few emails on Tuesday's show that I didn't repeat the phone number enough for people to call in. So there you have it. And again, freedomslips.com. The number is right there on the front. And if you didn't get to write the number down fast enough. Now, Paul, we were just talking about the idea, social conditioning, social engineering, et cetera. And then there are those people who, as we both agreed, that start to discover what's really going on, and then they can't really shut it off, because once you bite the apple, so to speak, it's in your mouth now, and you need to swallow the pill, and and that's what happened to me, and that's what happened to you, and that's what happened to a lot of people that I know. It doesn't even matter the subject. It could be GMOs. It could be the Federal Reserve. It could be the World Bank. It could be the mortgage frauds. Whatever it is, once you discover it, once you see just a little bit into that peephole, you can't just make it go away. What we do need on the planet is a wonderful thing that I think is occurring, whether it be chemtrails, geoengineering, fluoride in the water, GMOs, you name it. One thing that is happening is that we as humanity do get to reach out to one another through all of these different windows and doors of activism and support one another. And I think that is most important. So those of you who are listening, you may not be interested so much in the subject matter of chemtrails, but perhaps you're interested in the subject matter of GMOs. Whatever the subject matter is, remember this, we're all in this to win it, okay? All of us, no matter what it is, because it's all connected. Everything is connected. It comes down to one thing, I think, disclosure. And I don't know as much as that for me personally, Paul, that I'm going after disclosure. I want this stuff stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
All of it. Definitely. What about for you? Is disclosure on the list, or are you kind of going after the same thing? You just want this stuff stopped?
Yeah, obviously we want it stopped. We want a permanent ban put in place, at the very least a moratorium, so that we can go further into investigation, and that's where disclosure comes in. If the government does disclose that yes, they are performing these activities, then we can call them to account straight away and say, well, look, stop. You've got very little, if any, oversight on this whatsoever. No environmental impact studies have been done. Nobody's taken the time to do longer term studies in terms of how this is affecting the human populace. You've got these crazy ideas that you want to modify and manipulate and play with the weather to combat a CO2 crisis that you made of your own making. Stop it, so we can have a look at this and understand what it is that you're actually doing, and say, yeah, okay, well, it's a good thing, or no, it's not a good thing, it's a very bad thing, and stop spraying us and stop poisoning us and stop poisoning our food and our children and our water and everything. I mean, this involves every single person on the face of the planet. It's the very air we breathe. It's not like you can localize this protest to any given place. People are unhappy about one thing, so they protest over there. This is the whole planet. There's nothing else. If we don't have the air to breathe, there's nothing else that matters at all. It's all gonna go away. So we try to bring people to that focus as well. It's obviously not the easiest thing in the world to get your head around, Roxy.
Well, and you'd think that people would be able to digest it because, quote unquote, saving the planet isn't a new concept. The actual words saving the planet. It's not a new concept whatsoever. We have a question from the chat, Paul. They said, do you think it's all the same stuff used, or do they change it up?
From what we've been looking at in terms of, we're networking with people globally now, and we're finding all sorts of different people around the world are reporting different makeups in the chemtrails, in the aerosols. There are a number of people globally, possibly about 2% of the population, that can smell and taste stratospheric aerosols when they've been sprayed. Some 30 to 40 minutes afterwards, given the altitude that they're spraying at. These guys are reporting to us that they can taste strong metallic tastes or fungal things, or they can smell things like detergent, and so it's apparent that there's different chemtrails or different types of chemtrails being sprayed, and they have different reasons. We think we've identified around about 7 or 8 of those. So some of those might be biological material. There's certainly anecdotal evidence that human blood cells have been found in chemtrail material. It's an emerging field because the chemtrail science seems to be changing. As our awareness grows, as more and more people are waking up, it seems like they're actually camouflaging some of these trails to make them look like smaller, legitimate contrails. And I don't dispute contrails are real, but the atmospheric conditions that need to be present for them, it's quite rare that we should actually see them, even with the increased amount of air traffic, which is one of their standard little pat lines they like to bring out. So just to answer that caller, there is more material than aluminium, barium, strontium, sulfur dioxides, silver iodides, things like that, that's being found, and certainly people are aware of that. We would like more information in regards to that.
Sure.
But yeah, it's not just those things, definitely.
Well, and I think people have gotten interested in that, because different clouds look different ways. The bottom line is I agree with you, a culmination of different strategies and different weather modification, seed planting. I mean, they even have cloud bleaching, cloud seeding, make it rain somewhere, make it drought somewhere, move a storm, make it bigger, make it littler. I mean, all of it is basically boils down to controlling the global weather, and that's not cool. No, that's all there is to it.
You can buy weather futures now, and people are speculating on the weather. So, I mean, those in the know are obviously going, well, yeah, if we're going to geoengineer over here and we're going to create in the backwash of that a lovely climate to grow things, well, I'm going to buy food stocks in that area. And I'm making money out of this, Roxy. I mean, this is how insane it is.
Right. 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 Another question that's, let's see, from Is This Real Life user in the chat room. They say, yes, I heard about the blood cells in the trails. Was it synthetic or real cells?
From what I can tell and what I've sort of looked around and researched, it's a combination of both. There is obviously a biological aspect to what they're doing with chemtrailing. And, we're seeing people presenting now, and Clifford Carnicom's talked about Morgellons disease for many years now. But when you meet people in your local community around you who've got it, and you look at what it's doing to them, it's scary. So we know that there's nanoparticulate matter in both mechanicals and biologicals. And, people with Morgellons are presenting that through skin lesions. We're seeing that coming out from their skin in terms of woolly, wiry-looking things, or very solid metal-looking particles with rainbow aspects to them, and even geometric shapes are occurring. So, it's definitely they're trying to put a synthetic and a real human aspect into this. For what reason, I don't know. There's a lot of conjecture around that, how they're trying to maybe tune our bodies more in line with heart, or maybe even manipulating them for other purposes that we're unaware of. But that's a big field, and a lot of it's unsubstantiated. The fact is that they are doing it. The fact is that we are seeing these things presented, coming from human beings. And the fact is we don't know properly what that is and why that is. It's another sort of thing we really would like some more information on.
Sure, no doubt. And in the big picture, because it is a big picture, but in the big picture, the over plan here, why, again, are they doing this? What is the ultimate goal? Is it to kill off, 80% of the population of the world? Is it for money to trade on the stock market? Is it to cover up other toxicities that are going on, whether it be oil or nuclear, etc., or big commercial plants that have leaked for years and years, things like TCE poisoning that people are dying of now, years and years later? Is it, or are these programs in your, mind, are they all sort of centralizing on one thing, which would go back to depopulation? I mean, is this its motive?
There's a lot of ifs and is there, and I don't know that I could answer all of those specifically. I get the sense, Roxy, that in the background there's a lot of experimentation going on. They're trying different things out on the populace to see what kind of results they get. There's a lot of little offshoots to the rabbit hole. You could go down there, and a lot of those are fringe. While I look at them and follow them, I'm probably not the most qualified person to answer those questions specifically. I have my own personal theories and conjectures about some of those things, but that's not really something I want to talk about today, because that's all they are at the moment. It's their theories and conjecture. I don't have, strong empirical or anecdotal evidence that I could present and be confident about, some of those topics.
Sure, no problem. And we do have a caller. Let's see which caller. 803 area code. So, caller, are you here?
I'm here, but I was just listening. I thought I was calling a mobile number to listen.
Oh, you just want to listen to the show?
That's it. But
no, you can do that. But while you're on the show, do you want to ask a question?
Well, I just tuned in. It was I haven't have an idea of what the question would be.
Oh, gotcha. Well, why don't we just put you back on mute, and or you could just go ahead and continue to listen to the show, okay?
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And, with that in mind, too, Paul, what you were saying is you're not, you don't feel qualified to answer those questions. I understand why. I mean, we're talking social engineering, social conditioning. We're talking HAARP. We're talking, smart meters and smart meter grids and worldwide grids that they're setting up. That, and then we've got solar. We got some solar issues going on as well. I mean, that's undeniable at this point. X flares and so forth, and then we've got the cycle of the, it's the cycle of the Earth. We've got, we've got all kinds of stuff out in space that fly by every now and then. You know what I mean? And,
sure.
And then we've got synthetic biology, and we've got the, the idea that it's very possible that, we can actually become robotic. And, there are a lot of military men that have had their arms and their legs replaced and are able to walk and move their, with synthetic limbs and using the brain to have them operate and function and so forth. So, I mean, science is amazing. Science has provided, look at how you and I are talking. You're in Australia. I'm in Arizona, USA, and we're doing a show, and people from all over the world are listening to us right now. So, technology, science, all of it, it's got its good points, and I've always said to myself, for everything that science has ever done, and I think you might be someone who might agree with this, is that there are side effects to some of these experiments. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And these side effects aren't pretty.
No. It's I mean, look, it's we've made some wonderful advances in technology and leaps in science, but I mean, there's been a lot of horrible stuff in the background that's had to happen for those leaps to occur. If you look at what happened in World War II and Hitler's doctors and the medical leaps they made at the cost of experimenting on the population. There's there's a clear link there. So
Yes.
We are being experimented on, and to what degree, I don't think even the most polished of us fully comprehend and know yet. There's little sort of pointers that if you want to follow them, take you to some pretty scary and dark places. But I don't really want to go down that road today. It's more about I think if people wake up to the overall geoengineering chemtrail phenomenon first, then you can follow that back to its little home and see where the tentacles go from there. There's plenty to talk about in that regard, but my focus primarily is awareness, raising awareness, and even though I've got my own ideas in the background, and it's about staying on track with what we're doing. I think it's very easy for people to wander off, and you can spend a couple of years just looking at this before you even put your head back up again to see what's going on.
Absolutely. And you know what? When you go to, let's say, work, you're in construction, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
do you talk to your fellow construction workers about any of this?
I generally not. I'll talk to anybody who shows an inkling or an understanding. But a lot of the guys I work with, construction workers, it's all, what happened to the football at the weekend, and how many bars they went to, or ladies they might have gotten together with, or whatever. It's very base. A lot of these guys not interested in having a conversation like that. So you got to pick the people you talk to. It's only smart that you do that. But there's a few people that I'm working with that I've got a background conversation going with, definitely.
Do your co-workers know that you're an activist?
No, I think they'll be surprised when they see me on the 6 o'clock news one night. It'll be a revelation to them.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Well, and see, this is I'm asking because we also get people who are saying, my family and my friends think I'm crazy, and what do I do? And I think it would be the same thing that we, all as activists, you guide people to like-minded individuals, so that you can have that open discussion, and you're not tainted with anything, and you're not a crazy person, and you're not a crazy person. And as a matter of fact, there, as Paul has been saying all night, there is so much evidence to support the experiments are happening, not going to happen. They're in the process right now. There is something I'm looking at right now. It's from the Department of Earth, Atmospheric and Planetary Sciences in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And this is Valerio Lucarini. And the abstract is the intrinsic difficulties in building realistic climate models and in providing complete, reliable, and meaningful observational data sets, and the conceptual impossibility of testing theories against data imply that the usual Galilean scientific validation criteria do not apply to climate science. And it goes on and on and on and on. Yeah, it's great. It's a great piece. And anyway, it's a white paper, and it goes on and on and on. And, obviously they're looking for some money, as you had mentioned earlier. And the key words are climate change, complex systems, decision-making processes under uncertainty, and model system biases, and so forth. So, a lot of money is spent on just the hypotheses of an idea, etc. That's not even being implemented. That's not even being studied. And then it goes all the way up into the actual implementation. Who's in those planes that are spraying this stuff, Paul? Who is it?
To my mind, there are three separate groups that are, in terms of being in the air, that are involved here. There's the obvious ones in terms of military and private contractors. But I also believe that commercial airlines are definitely involved. We've been collecting data on commercial airlines for months and months, in fact, 12 months now. And every single piece of that points to a massive involvement from commercial airlines all over the world, and these are all big name companies. They're well-known, branded tourist flying airlines that are up there every day, and we're seeing massive chemtrails coming out the back of them, and we're living under those flight paths. So they're the three culprits, and we'd certainly encourage anyone who might be listening who's involved in that industry, who knows what's going on in the background, but maybe a little bit frightened to speak up, to come to us. We'll offer you a safe environment, or as safe as we possibly can, obviously, to do that, and come and talk to us about it and share maybe some information. We're looking for whistleblowers from the airline industry, everything from suppliers right up to pilots. So, and we're certainly, we're a peaceful body. We're a peaceful group of people. We don't want any problems, any trouble. We don't want to create trouble for anyone. We're certainly very non-violent in our approach. We just want answers. So if anyone's listening that has those answers and they know that their conscience is going to be burnt at the end of the day if they don't provide them, wanting to step forward, then email me. The email's up on Roxy's website, and we'll start a conversation in the background, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about it.
That's great. And have you spoken with any pilots? Speaking of pilots.
Yeah, I have a couple. There's a couple of pilots who want to speak to me, actually, but I know that they're coming from a different angle. They're certainly wanting a debate on chemtrail contrail science and that specific debate. I want to keep that pigeonholed and working around in that sort of zone, rather than branching into the whole geoengineering side of things, which they'll have to get on that page sooner or later. So I wish they'd hurry up and do it sooner, so that we can organise some of these debates that they want to have. I've certainly got some very good speakers who'd be interested in talking to them at the end of the day, but we're not going to do it on a contrail chemtrail basis, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I know a couple of civilian pilots, and I've spoken to them. Pilots are a special breed. They love what they do, and they love aviation. I mean, I'm an aviation enthusiast, have been since I was a kid, Roxy. I do anything to get around warbirds and older planes especially. It's always been a passion of mine. So I understand aviation, how that works. But pilots are a special breed. They like to protect their own very, very much, and that's understandable. So again, they're probably in the less receptive side of the community, and those that are in the know certainly are in the hush-hush side of it all.
Oh, okay. So do you think that there are pilots who are completely unaware of this, though?
Oh, totally, yeah. No,
okay.
I
they're in the
agree
dark.
with that statement. They are in the dark. It makes you wonder why, if you're flying along and you're seeing all this stuff in the air specifically. But I think a lot of pilots are either ignorant, or if they do know what's going on, they've been fed the lie that this is for the planet's good and it's okay, it's not harming anyone. But we just we don't want to create mass freaking out from people below. So come join with us. You're the good guys. You're doing the right thing. We'll protect you. We'll look after you, sort of thing. So.
Yeah, I'm very curious about the whole pilot thing. We had a pilot that came to us, and gave the whole contrail science debate, and of course that's so tired for me. I just can't do it. But and you know why? But it's interesting because then he got on the bandwagon of, and we checked him out, and he's actually a real commercial pilot, Anyway, long story short, he said, he would be willing to try to, get in the good fight for, pollution, because there is that aspect as well, pollution, and he'd be at least willing to do that, and at least he was giving that, part of himself to it, and willing to take that on. And we found out he's actually running for a government seat as well. So
Oh,
in
wow.
Congress,
Okay.
yeah. So it's interesting because if he was for real, and his name is Stephen Knuthel, and Stephen, if you're listening to the show like you do all the time when you're not flying, call in the show right now at 347-688-2902. Seriously, he's told me he's gonna. And welcome back on a Friday evening, and I want to thank everybody who's taken the time to listen to the show tonight. Because it is Friday, but you're not allowed to go anywhere until after this show, and that's all there is to it. Anyway, Paul, what I'd like to know first of all is how did your rally go in January this year? What happened? How did you get everybody together? You took to the streets. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure, Roxy, no problems. Look, just for some background information, a rally just doesn't pop out of thin air, and it takes a lot of networking with people over, a reasonable amount of time, at least sort of 9 to 12 months in some cases, before you can get something that's going to be workable and usable. I certainly didn't want to start something that was going to be just local. I wanted to see something more international. So 12 months ago, I looked around. I found a friend online who had started a group called Australians Against Chemtrails, a guy called Matt MC. And Matt and I banded together, and we strategized how we would go about raising awareness, generally speaking. And we thought, well, there's a couple of groups in the country on Facebook, but really nothing sort of significant was happening. So we put a group in every city in the country, major city, and have started feathering out into regional areas. And then in those groups, we started building communities. Some of them have been more successful than others, but that's just a facet of how it's sort of been put together. And we've over the last 12 months, we've got traction with that. We put in people who were definitely in the know about what's going on, or awake to what's going on, and located them to the communities around them, sort of thing. So it became a grassroots point for all of those people, and then through that process of education, because a lot of people are still coming in, waking up at that point. We spend time educating in the groups and talking about what's going on in the background. And these are just ordinary citizens like you and I, Roxy. They're just ordinary people in society and in life, and they are wanting something done about it. I mean, they're scared. They wake up and they're going, well, hang on, I'm being sprayed. Who's spraying me and why? And now they've got to a point where they're angry about that, and in a good way, they want to do something about that. So that sort of all has to happen in the background first. If you're thinking about getting something going in terms of a protest, you need to have a mindset that you are engaging people at a grassroots level in your community, and you're building upwards from there. That's the best place to come from. So we got that to a point where I said to them all, mid to late last year, and we bound together with another group, the Australian and New Zealand Geoengineering Protest Group, and we kicked that off with the January 20 protests. So we had maybe 3-4 months of planning leading up to that, advertising the event in all of our grassroots groups, advertising it in terms of an international scale. And we went through, Russ Tanner at Global Skywatch, Dane Wigington from Geoengineering Watch, the guys at aircraft.org, anyone and everyone who would listen to us in terms of, wanting to promote the show and promoting it for us by advertising. A lot of people not on Facebook. So, I mean, Facebook is a limited sort of mechanism in that regard. So we set up, a parallel email entity associated with those adverts to capture that audience. And we've certainly had, a high level of interest from people who are non-Facebookers who want to engage the protest. And we've now been able to just this last week actually let everyone know what the addresses are for the upcoming April one. But in terms of January, there was a 3 to 4 month work up to that. and then we launched it, and found people who are responsible in every major city. We're still looking for some people in some of the cities and regional areas to step up and some of those communities grow a little bit bigger. But we got the nuts and bolts of it together for January 20th. I hosted the Melbourne protest where we had 65 people come out for our first event, and we had some 180 over 16 to 18 locations in 3-4 different countries for the overall January 20 protest, which is fairly, it's modest, it's humble start. It certainly wasn't groundbreaking and news making in any way, but I think a lot of people sat back and watched and wondered what was going to happen when we launched this process, and they watched it and saw some of the footage afterwards and realised that, hey, look, it's just people just like them sitting at home, ordinary people who got out on the day. We had, mums and dads, we had teens, we had, 3-4-year-olds, we had even babies and dogs on the protest with us. Not your typical protest sort of setup, just ordinary concerned citizens. So I was really pleased with the overall result in terms of what happened for January 20th. We had a few failures on the day we've learnt from and restructured some things there. It's certainly very much at the outset of what we're trying to achieve in terms of an ongoing action, and it's in its formative stage right now. So April the 20th, I'm expecting maybe double the numbers, and I think people have formed relationships from the previous events, now have that nucleus, and talking to someone online is completely different to meeting them in person when you can look them in the eye and maybe give them a hug or shake their hand, and you get a better sense of trust in somebody and who somebody is. So as we go along the road, we'll get more and more traction through personal physical relationships, which is really where we should be. And what we should be doing. I encourage anyone who's listening, sitting behind their keyboard, who complains about what's going on but hasn't got out to a protest yet for whatever reason, to come and engage the community in a protest, because number one, it gives you a whole different perspective about who's out there and what's going on. Number two, it frees your mind from any fears you might have had that men with black vans might be following us around or whatever. I mean, that's just rubbish. And number three, it energizes you to move forward into the future. It motivates you. It releases something inside of you that says, yeah, I'm actually doing something. I'm making a noise. I'm on the street. I'm not just sitting there behind my keyboard bitching and moaning about it and complaining or saying what are we going to do. I am doing something, and it's very, very liberating. It's a great feeling of freedom. So if you're thinking about getting along to the next protest or a protest, shoot us an email and I'll certainly plug you in where I can, and maybe put you on a mailing list into the future as we develop the protest movement across the world.
Sounds fabulous. I mean, I love it. And right now, you did say you were in four countries.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Yeah, 4 countries definitely. We're networking with you guys in the US through a couple of sites there, both Facebook and just normally online. We've certainly worked in the background, like I said, with Russ Tanner and Dane Wigington, all the guys from What in the World They're Spraying, Scott and Michael. We've talked to them. We've talked to Morgan Carey and Skull. Skull, the Korean reggae artist who put out the song Sky Die.
Yes.
Cry Die, sorry. We've had dialogue and conversation with those guys, and we've formed relationships with them. We're forming relationships through Europe and the UK right now with Chemtrails Project UK, London Geoengineering, and Truthers Support Group. Those guys over there, they're fantastic. They're energised, they're awake. And we've got our Down Under Australia and New Zealand connections. We're looking to grow into every country, though. I'm talking to some of the guys in Europe right now We're just getting over a few language hurdles. But, there are activists everywhere right now. We're seeing protests, in Switzerland, in Belgium, in Spain, in the UK, right through the UK. The Urban Hippie just organised the latest one with Mona Norman there on April the 6th at Hyde Park. Great turnout there. Toxic Skies Ireland did a great video presentation right at the start of that. I was very impressed with. Kelly Doherty from the Californian-based citizens group had an action a couple of weeks back now where they went to San Francisco City Hall and 35 people turned up on the day. They had a wonderful day, and even right at the end of their protest, they panned up from Kelly's face and there's a dirty great big chemtrail flying right over her head.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it was great. In terms of an advert, you couldn't have got it any better.
That's so apropos. That's wonderful.
Send you the link, but I mean,
I would like to see that. Yeah,
we're sure they actually even geoengineer some of our weather for good weather for the protests, so we can't see that because we're making some waves down here. But it's a lot of fun, and a lot of energy is released, and people all over the world, just ordinary people. These are not seasoned activists or protesters or militant left or right wing whatevers. These are just ordinary citizens who are really concerned because they have, family and children, and they're worried and they want to know what's going on. And the government's denying everything, and we're sick and tired of that denial. So we're just going to keep going till we get some exposure and some traction, and keep being up in their face with it all, and doing that in a peaceful manner. I've got to stress, Roxy, there's people, especially shills and trolls right now, they're trying to paint us as some kind of wacko activists who have secret, surface to air missile supplies and want to shoot down planes or laser point.
Oh, I know. Terrible, isn't it?
It's insane. I mean, just the lengths that these people are going to try and paint us as fringe is quite significant and telling of itself. I mean, we are not that people. We're just peaceful, ordinary, concerned citizens. We're not anything that's out there in that sort of vein whatsoever. And anyone who engages those shills and trolls on that level, please stop it. Please don't feed them. Starve them to death. They like you to come and play on their pages and walls. They like that because it distracts you from your real focus, which is, creating awareness in the community and letting people who care know and who need to know. If you're wasting all your time fighting with trolls and shills, I'd just say to you, stop it. Stop feeding them. Leave them alone. They hate that the most when you leave them alone. And refocus yourself, reorient yourself, get out there and do something that's positive and it's going to make a difference. Talking to those guys won't make a difference. It'll just send you batty.
That is really, really good advice, Paul, because you're absolutely right. I am seeing this everywhere right now. It's almost like the full court press or something, because they're getting anybody anytime for anything with chemtrails. And then they've started a bunch of group pages on Facebook, and chemtrail activists are going to those group pages, and I've said the same thing, like, don't go there. Don't even go to there. Just stop participating in the conversations, because you're absolutely right, Paul. It's a complete distraction, and if you stop talking to them, it's not working.
I mean, most of those groups, one of the biggest ones I've seen has 100 people in it. That might be the biggest troll group. Most of them are like 20, 40, 30, 60, something like that, So it's only a very, very small minority, and they do create a lot of waves, and they feed on your angst. And, I don't even want to give them this airtime, but, at the same time, I just want to point out to people, if you feed them, they'll starve. If you stop having the conversation with them, they may not leave you alone with what they do, but it won't affect you. Do something positive. Just don't do that.
Right. Well, what you're talking about is much more proactive, and like you said, there's an energetic to it as well component. An energetic component makes you feel good.
It does, definitely. it's a liberating feeling. I've said this on a couple of shows now, different hosts that I've talked to, that when you get out there for the first time and you're in the throng of that and the hub of it, and people are handing out information and talking to people on the street, and there's an energy that's released it's just truly exciting. It's a real buzz, and you come away from that just feeling so much more positive about how you view the world and how you view your place in it, and having done that, you I don't know what it is you release. It must be something inside your brain that you release that just says, I'm not going to take this lying down. I do have a conscience. I do have a right to speak and share truth and knowledge, and I've exercised that, and I feel good about it. I feel liberated about that, and I'm going to do that again and again until I wake enough people up that they understand what's going on, and until we're a voice that's can't be denied or shouted down or ignored, and until my government tells me what's going on. Because right now, government, you're lying to us. We know you're lying to us, and we want you to stop. We want disclosure. So it just empowers you to keep going for that as a goal. And just sitting behind your keyboard is not enough. Putting your boots out on the street is the next step, to my mind. Be a keyboard activist at the same time, and there's plenty you can do in terms of emails and background setup. I mean, there's all sorts of administrative stuff as well that needs to take place, and that supports what we're doing. So, it's very important things. I'm not saying that anyone on a keyboard's not doing something important, but certainly getting out in public is a great thing to do.
Surely. And by the way, we had another question from the chat room. You and I were on the pilots, and Cher had asked, are many pilots coming from the military?
I did see that question before, and I was thinking at the time, Roxy, the military don't pay their pilots all that well. Mm-hmm. So if you go into commercial aviation, you will find a lot of ex-military pilots. They've done their time in the military. They've got their flying hours up. They've possibly enjoyed what they've done in there. But the money is not that great. So they've gone to the commercial airlines where the bigger bucks are. So, definitely a lot of commercial and ex-military pilots in the commercial arena and civil aviation arena as well. There's certainly, I don't know what the percentage of that would be, maybe 60, 70%, something like that. I don't think a lot of people go in commercially, certainly, in through the front door. I think a lot of them are ex-military, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, that would actually make sense. And speaking of commercial planes that are having chemtrails come out of them, it's interesting that you just mentioned that it is commercial as well as military. Yesterday, I got some photos of a 747, and it sprayed from horizon to horizon.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the 747. And I just thought, oh, my God. And by the way, it was interesting because it was flying in the military flight airspace. It wasn't flying in the commercial space. Yeah.
Well, like I said, three types of industries are involved, and that's military, private contractors, and the commercial guys. So another thing we've been doing over the last 12 months is, and we could probably do this a little bit better than most places in the world because of the volume of air traffic that we've got, is mapping and following some of the flight radar programs with what's going on with chemtrails, obviously. So we built a network across the country of grassroots community groups. Inside that network, there are further groups who are sky watchers, we call them. They get out with time and date stamp cameras. They'll take a photo of a plane flying over, laying an obvious trail. We'll then flight track that on the radar. We'll take a photo screenshot of that. We'll couple that with the flight radar screenshot, And that gives us a very powerful tool. We've been collecting all of that information all this time, and inside of all of that, we're definitely very concerned and can confirm that commercial aircraft are involved. So, just another thing for you guys to be engaged with, though, like getting out and taking photos is, especially with a time and date stamp on them, is a great way to maybe let some of that energy off from just sitting behind your keyboard and feeling you can't do something. Being part of a program like that just allows you to, share in terms of documented evidence for everyone to enjoy down the track. So there are things that you can do every day to engage this and make positive inroads and be a productive contributing member to bringing about government disclosure. So don't feel that you just, there's not anything that you can do. I just encourage anyone who's thinking about getting involved, get involved. Simple as that. Just jump in, start talking to some of the leaders and the admin, and find out what you can do to contribute and take a lead from those guys.
Oh, yeah, I think that there's always a spot for people. And Paul, thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for being inspired to actually make some changes for the planet. And, thank you for, having your wake-up call and saying, hey, I've got to do something about this, So I've only heard good things about you from others in other countries even, and they just love you. So you're obviously making a big change, and your name is really getting out there, and we're in support of what you're doing. And of course we'll have an article with all the dates coming up that you're going to be doing your quarterly protests and so forth, and stay on track with that with you as best we can. So thank you so much for your contribution. It's huge.
Thanks, Roxy, and thanks for having us on the show. It's only by getting on shows like yours and sharing nationally, internationally with people all around the world that we can get this exposure and get this message out and help to wake people up. I mean, I'm not the be all and end all of this. In fact, if I had a choice, I probably wouldn't be doing this at all, Roxy. But like I said, I looked around 2 years, 12 months ago, nobody was really making some inroads in terms of activism and protest. There was small stuff going on, but there's a need out there for some global coordination and communication, and I just put a little bit of that ball rolling and engaged a few people out there. So, one person can make a difference, and we're certainly going to try and grow the global situation into, a movement that's alive and vital, and we've got that well underway. They can't really stop us in that process now. So, like I said, you guys out there, if you're listening, if you're thinking about getting involved, getting out from behind your keyboards, I encourage you. In fact, I implore you. We need you on the street. Please come join us.
Absolutely. Great. And I just want to thank Green Girl who posted in the chat. She thanks you very much for the show, Paul. She said, lovely guest. And I think there was another gal, DeBee, and she had invited all her Aussie friends, she says, and they said that they thought you gave some excellent advice tonight. So thank you so much for the work again. And hey, if everybody out there wants to stick around, up next is Reality Check with Nighthawk. And as you well know, Nighthawk is the owner of Revolution Radio. It is how we even have this opportunity to have this open discussion of the truth every day and every night on Revolution Radio. So you need to stay tuned and give him a thumbs up as well for all the hard work that he does. Again, thank you, Paul, for joining the show. Everyone have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you on field radiation management, let's say, or all the geoengineering, and of course those grids in the sky that we refer to so fondly of as chemtrails. What are chemtrails? Has anybody tested chemtrails? What are the effects of chemtrails? What are the effects of geoengineering on the planet? And who gave them permission? That's what I want to know. I'm sure that's what people like my guest, who will be coming on the show shortly, wants to know. I want to know who is in charge and who gave them permission, because we, the people of all of these countries, all the countries of the world, we are supposed to be in charge. We are the governing agents of our countries. we weren't given the memo. This is an extraordinary subject, one that I've been investigating for nearly 4 years, and the rabbit hole is deep. That's all I can say. The rabbit hole is absolutely astounding. And those who've been hired as disinformationists and so forth by the governments of the world to be in the center of activism groups and cause disharmony and slow down momentum with infighting, etc. It's such a huge topic. Tonight's topic is chemtrail activism growing, the protest movements, networking internationally, and of course the April 20th protest. A 46-year-old New Zealander living in Melbourne, Australia. My guest, Mr. Paul Mack, has a background in construction and currently works as a project manager for a large construction company. He says he was awakened in 2001 to the global situation regarding Agenda 21 and the New World Order. And he's spent the last few years seeing just how deep the rabbit hole goes. 12 months ago, he became increasingly concerned about growing geoengineering trends and the lack of activism taking place to bring accountability to the situation. He strongly believes that unless action is taken now to bring a ban, moratorium into place to halt geoengineering and stratospheric aerosol spraying, aka chemtrails, that the planet and life as we know it is in great danger from an extinction-level event. The madness of a handful of evil men and women must be stopped, and it is up to you and I to call these people to account. In partnership with some fellow Australians and New Zealanders, they have worked hard over the last 12 months to bring together a national, international network of like-minded people who are documenting and collating the growing body of evidence in regards to chemtrails, as well as forming a growing international protest movement to bring awareness to the public arena. The Australian and New Zealand geoengineering protests had their first mass rally in January 2013, where over 180 people from 4 nations took to the streets to protest geoengineering and demand government disclosure.
It's man-made in as much as we're causing it by geoengineering, not anything that the planet's doing to itself, that's for sure.
Agreed. And thank you for interjecting to that piece, because it's the propaganda is on. And, it's quite interesting because just to mention briefly here in the States, there was a Clean Energy Standard Act of 2012 that was initiated in March of 2012. And, of course, one of the groups that was backing that legislation was Al Gore and his organization. And it never made it through, which I think my point is, it is interesting that even the governments, I think, have massive confusion around what they're even supposed to be doing. As far as I think the left hand's not speaking to the right. And I did look at a bill that actually was passed in Australia, and I read through some of it. And these bills are absolutely convoluted, and I don't think that they're being put together for the sake of clean energy, free energy, as they are summarizing. I think it has a lot more to do with cap and trade and money and more money. It appears that they want to reduce, greenhouse emissions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and even the use of oil. But it seems that that's never going to happen. And in our country, this Clean Energy Standard Act of 2012 never even passed. I mean, they can't even get it off the floor. So, you know what I mean? It's like it's coming down. It's coming down. And again, the left hand not speaking to the right. So you probably have a lot of people who are in government who don't even know what the heck is going on. And that's proof. I mean, for sure, these bills are 2,000 and 3,000 pages long, and nobody reads them, and nobody signs them, or nobody wants to sign off on them because they don't understand them. Regardless, how do you feel about the bill that was the law, I should say, that was passed in Australia, or are you aware of it?
Yeah, a little bit. Look, I mean, a lot of those things, Roxy. I mean, these scientists. Far from being, the independent, authoritative body that they possibly could and should be, they're beholden to the government for their grant money to do their research, and of course the government can talk to them about their research and say, we just want you to tweak that a little bit to suit our ends, and we'll give you some more grant money to that. So basically, a lot of these guys, they've got all the huff and puff and bluster, and you should listen to us, and we're the kings of the information. But essentially, they're just media and propaganda whores, and they sell themselves for a high price. And then Tim Flannery is one of our guys down here. I mean, a few years ago, he received the Order of Australia for his work in climate science and predicting that our dams would be empty, and houses would be flooding with ocean water by 2012, which might add was last year, and then currently buys a beachside property and.
Revolution Radio proudly presents live from Phoenix, Arizona, the Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here for topics you won't hear about on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, nutrition, and conspiracy facts regarding your personal sovereignty. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
And a very good evening to everybody. This is our first debut for Friday nights. We've added Friday nights to the list of shows that we do. So thanks for joining us here. And I have a very interesting guest on this evening from Australia, and I'm going to bring him on shortly. Of course, many of you know from the event pages on Facebook that we now do for the shows who our guest is, and what the topic is, of course, is chemtrails and chemtrail activism. I'm looking at an article that's really disturbing to me right now. It's called Get Used to Record-Breaking Heat Bureau. It is come out of the Age of Environment tabloid. That's where the story hailed from in January, I believe. And we're going to have a few articles this weekend that are going to be coming up on the Truth Denied website as well. Just go to the breaking news pages. And of course, will be interlinked with Paul Mack, who is my guest this evening. And if anyone wants to take a look at any of his website and his work, it's all linked on thetruthDenied.com. And of course, it'll be in the chat room. I want to thank a Mad Painter for producing my shows on Fridays now. I appreciate it. And of course, if you want to listen to a Mad Painter's shows, it's called Open Canvas, and they're on Monday nights here on Revolution Radio at 10 p.m. Eastern. Again, that's Open Canvas, Mondays at 10 p.m. And he's got some extraordinary controversial shows as well. So you might want to take a listen to him as well. The article that I'm looking at that I find disturbing, let me read a few of the highlights of it for you all. There's a photo of a beach in Australia with a lot of people on the beach, and it says, "Life's a beach. As the warming trend increases over coming years, record-breaking heat will become more and more common, scientists say. Temperatures off the charts as Australia turns deep purple, and U.S. posts year of record high temperatures as well. The heat wave has that has scorched the nation since Christmas is a taste of things to come, with this week's records set to tumble again and again in the coming years, climate scientists are saying. Quote, those of us who spend our days trawling and contributing to the scientific literature on climate change are becoming increasingly gloomy about the future of human civilization. That's a strong statement. The hottest average maximum temperature ever recorded across Australia, 40.33 degrees, that's not Fahrenheit, I believe, set on Monday, again this was written in January of 2013, may only stand for 24 hours and be eclipsed when all of Tuesday's readings come in. Previously, that record had stood since December 21st of 1972. The current heat wave, in terms of its durations, its intensity, and its extent, is now unprecedented in records, said the Bureau of Meteorology's manager of climate monitoring and prediction, David Jones. He said clearly the climate system is responding to the background warming trend. Everything that happens in the climate system now is taking place on a planet which is a degree hotter than it used to be. Now, a degree may not sound like a lot to all of you, but it is. As the warming trend increases over coming years, record-breaking heat will become more and more common, Dr. Jones said. We know that global climate doesn't respond monotonically. It does go up and down with natural variation. That's why some years are hotter than others, because of a range of factors. But we're getting many more hot records than we're getting cold records. That's not an issue that is explained away by natural variation. Australia's climate is based on an interplay of many factors, including regional and local weather patterns, El Nino and La Nina climate cycles, and the Indian Ocean dip hole, all superimposed on the greenhouse gas-driven warming trend. While temperatures vary on a local and regional scale, globally it has now been 27 years since the world experienced a month that was colder than average. The impacts of the rising heat on farming, food, water, and human health have been studied closely for years, and the trends being played out now mirror those laid out years ago in projections by the Bureau of Meteorology, the CICERO, and the Garnet Climate Change Review. Now, if there is one thing that I will interject here, we are seeing a lot of controversy when it comes to the weather, extreme weather, temperatures that are too low, temperatures that are too high, mostly temperatures that are going up and down sporadically, which I term is as unstable weather. The global climate is unstable. And what does that mean to all of us humans or anybody that's living on the planet? Instability has to be pointing at something. Now, I don't follow the global warming hoax that is linked to cap and trade and all the rest of it, and quite a few of the laws that have aggravated me in regards to climate change. By the way, climate change is now the new terminology for global warming. This is a major concern, and then you enter into this. He now runs a quarterly protest, the next dates being April 20th and July 20th, which we will get into tonight. We have the links for the Facebook page and the email available for you all on thetruthDenied.com. It's all linked up right there on the front page. We want you to link up, like their pages, join them in this movement. I know it's hard to believe that people are, the majority of humans do not even know, are not even aware of geoengineering programs, this thing we call climate change, the money behind it, the billionaires that are funding it, completely unaware. So I'd like to welcome my guest, Mr. Paul Mack. And I thank you, Paul, for the work that you're doing to bring awareness to the world. Welcome to the show, and how are you doing?
Hey, Roxy. Thank you for having me on the show. It's good to be here and doing well this morning, a little after 10 o'clock in the morning down in Melbourne, Australia.
Awesome.
So, really good to be here. And, just listening to your preamble and I've gone to that article that you were reading from in our local newspaper down here, The Age, and that beach that's at the top of that article is like a 30-minute drive from where I am. And the article itself is pretty much clearly a propaganda piece on climate change and what's going on. Those record-breaking temperatures that you were talking about, I can verify, having just lived through them, that a lot of those days we had very clearly geoengineered skies and massive HARP activity happening to drive that temperature up. In fact, the day they broke the record, the very next day, the temperature dropped down some 15, 20 degrees literally, and it rained. It was almost like they turned the HARP off and just let it sort of reset itself. So they pushed that boundary deliberately to break that record and use it as a tool to say, see, look, climate change is real. Australia is suffering big bushfires and high temperatures, and they're record breaking. That was a very, very deliberate thing that they did, and it was not pleasant to live through temperature-wise, I can tell you. Just did a quick Celsius to Fahrenheit conversion. The average temperature during that period, 40.33 Celsius, is 104.59 Fahrenheit. And we typically had days that were, in the 42, 43 bracket, which is 109 for you guys. So very, very hot temperatures, very, very difficult to live in those sorts of temperatures for prolonged basis. Not our normal cycle. We'd normally have 3 or 4 really hot days, and we'll go through a very humid period with massive thunderstorms and a few days of cool down, and then repeat that. That's typical for Australian weather, not 9, 10, 11, 12 days straight of high 30 into 40 degree temps. So it was interesting to hear you talk about that, because it's clearly an engineered piece to just promote the furthering climate change agenda. And climate change is real, but it's